you and I talked about this the other day. This is not just where Jimmy Carter grew up, but it's where some of his views on racism and race relations were formed. And as you write in your book, it's more complex than some would like to remember. Some remember him as a man who merged his religious views and his ethics with civil rights and racial equity, but it wasn't always that way.
No, it's a complex story, and in some ways it's an epic American story. If you look at the journey from this boyhood in the Jim Crow South, where he was barefoot for most of the year, and take all the way nearly 100 years later to where he's a global icon and has taken the civil rights movement that he didn't actually participate in as a young man, and he's turned it into a global human rights movement. Very consciously taking that civil rights movement that he witnessed in the South and in some ways making up for his failure to stand up more when he was young, in some sense almost atoning for it, doing in the second half of his life what he did not do in the first half. But he was much, much more liberal than almost anybody in that area. While his father was a segregationist, his mother, Ms. Lillian, who some viewers might remember from when she would go on Johnny Carson, he was president, a very amusing, colorful woman. She was a nurse, and she treated Black patients for free. And she was the only woman in that entire area in Sumter County who had anything nice to say but Abraham Lincoln. And then there was a third parent, a Black woman farmhand whose husband was the foreman of the Carter farm, who lived on the property that you're seeing right now. And her name was Rachel Clark. And she gave Jimmy Carter much of his love of nature and helped to contribute to his deep faith. And the fact that from the time he was a boy and had Black playmates to him defending the first Black midshipman at the Naval Academy from abuse, to his efforts to integrate the church in Plains, Georgia, unsuccessful efforts. Carter was always on the liberal, or you might say more moderate end of these questions. Nobody ever remembered him saying anything racially offensive, even though almost everybody in that area used the N-word on a daily basis. Not Jimmy Carter. Having said that, he had a choice to make about whether to be in politics or be in the civil rights movement. And this is something that I discussed with him on a number of occasions. And by the way, that home you're seeing there, that's the boyhood home. It was built from a Sears catalog kit, arts and crafts home. And that tennis court, which Jimmy Carter's father built, and Jimmy Carter eventually became a very good tennis player, the red clay of Georgia on that court. But the racial journey that he went on had these bumps in the road, and he did make a decision at one point that he wanted to get into political office so that he could do good, especially on education. But he couldn't get there if he was a civil rights activist. There would have been zero chance of him getting into politics. So he did sometimes tack a little bit away from the liberal position and say things like in support of or friendly to somebody like George Wallace, although he despised him personally, in order to get into office. And so he never actually met Dr. King, but later became close friends with Coretta Scott King and Daddy King, and he hung the portrait of Dr. King in the Georgia state capitol and integrated Georgia government when he was governor. And then he moved the United States government from tokenism to true diversity when he became president. And he became the great figure of racial justice that we know today. But it was a journey, and American history is complicated. And I think it's important when you're assessing a president that you see him in full.